Think your refrigerator is the only way to keep meat fresh? The Amish would beg to differ. For generations, they've perfected preservation methods that can extend meat's shelf life by an impressive 60% longer than modern refrigeration. And they do it all without electricity. While we're paying monthly power bills to keep our steaks fresh, Amish communities are quietly using simple, time-tested methods that anyone can master. Picture a cold autumn morning in Amish country where the sweet aroma of smoking meat drifts through the air. This isn't just about making food taste better, though it certainly does that too. When meat is properly smoked, magical chemical reactions occur that create an environment where bacteria simply can't thrive, extending shelf life by 3 to 6 months without any need for refrigeration. The process starts with choosing the right wood, and each type brings its own personality to the party. Hickory, the traditional favorite, adds a robust, savory flavor that pairs perfectly with beef and pork. Applewood is like nature's candy, infusing meat with subtle sweetness that makes chicken and turkey sing. Cherrywood, that's the sophisticated cousin, bringing a mild fruity note that makes pork taste like it's been to finishing school. But before any smoking begins, proper meat preparation is crucial. The Amish trim excess fat, leaving just enough to keep the meat moist, and cut pieces to consistent sizes that would make a geometry teacher proud. Too thick, and you're asking for trouble. Too thin, and you'll end up with meat jerky, which isn't necessarily bad, but probably not what you're aiming for. The fire building process is where things get interesting. Forget about digital thermometers. The Amish use the hand test to gauge temperature. Hold your palm about 6 inches above the smoker grate. If you can keep it there for 5 to 6 seconds, you're in the sweet spot of 200 to 225 degrees Fahrenheit. Any less time and your fire's too hot, any more and it's too cool. For smoke density, there's the 2-finger test. If you can see your first 2 fingers through the smoke at arm's length, you've got it just right. Common issues? They've seen them all. White smoke means your fire needs more airflow, and your meat might end up tasting like an ashtray. If your meat develops a bitter crust, you've gone overboard with the smoke. Think of it like overdressing for a casual dinner party. Too much of a good thing is still too much. Remember, smoking meat isn't just a preservation method. It's an art form that transforms ordinary cuts into extraordinary meals. And unlike your electricity bill, these skills, once mastered, last a lifetime. If smoking is the artist of meat preservation, salt curing is the scientist. This ancient method isn't just throwing salt at meat and hoping for the best. It's a precise process that can keep meat fresh for 6 to 12 months without taking up any precious fridge space. And here's a mind-blowing tidbit. 1 pound of salt can preserve 40 pounds of meat. Talk about getting more bang for your buck. The Amish primarily use 3 curing methods, each with its own special touch. Dry curing, their go-to favorite, involves rubbing salt directly onto the meat, creating a protective barrier that would make a medieval castle wall jealous. Brine curing, or the wet method, submerges meat in a salty solution that's basically a spa treatment for your future dinner. Then there's combination curing, which is exactly what it sounds like. The best of both worlds, like wearing a belt and suspenders, which, coincidentally, many Amish do. Timing is everything in the curing world. Different meats need different treatment periods, kind of like how your teenager needs more sleep than your toddler. Pork belly destined for bacon needs about 7 days per inch of thickness. A hefty ham might need 3 to 4 weeks to cure properly. Smaller cuts like chicken breasts, they're the quick learners, usually ready in 24 to 48 hours. The salt-to-meat ratio is where the magic happens. For dry curing, the golden rule is 1 cup of salt per 5 pounds of meat. Too little salt and you're basically inviting bacteria to a feast. Too much and you'll be drinking water like a camel after eating your preserved masterpiece. Storage requirements are surprisingly simple, but non-negotiable. You'll need a cool, dark space with temperatures between 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, not too different from your grandmother's root cellar. Humidity should hover around 65 to 75%, which is perfect for curing but terrible for your hair day. Critical success factors: temperature, humidity, and timing form the holy trinity of curing. Get these wrong, and you'll end up with something that even the family dog won't touch. The Amish have a saying: rush the cure, spoil the meat, though they probably say it in Pennsylvania Dutch. Speaking of spoiled meat, let's talk about how to know when curing is complete. The meat should be firm to the touch, but not rock hard. If it's still squishy, it needs more time. If it's as hard as your mother-in-law's fruitcake, you've gone too far. The color should be uniformly darker than fresh meat, but if it starts looking like a rainbow, that's your cue to start over. Meat drying is like teaching your meat to survive on its own. Strip away 60% of its water weight, and you've got yourself a self-reliant protein that can last 4 to 8 months without any modern conveniences. The Amish have turned this into such a precise science that they can predict the perfect drying conditions just by observing the morning dew. Traditional drying takes place in special sheds that are more carefully designed than most modern homes. These structures work with natural airflow patterns like they're conducting a wind symphony. The positioning is crucial. Too close to trees and you'll block the breeze. Too exposed and your meat might as well be trying to dry in a hurricane. The ideal spot catches consistent breezes while avoiding direct sunlight, which would turn your carefully prepared meat into something resembling shoe leather. The only product we'll ever promote on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a veteran prepper, about 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis times like the Great Depression and wartime that are impossible to find elsewhere. We decided to promote his book because we are the last generation able to share these techniques and superfoods to our children or grandchildren. It would be a shame to see this information about highly nutritious foods and preservation methods to survive crises disappear. You can also find a book about herbal remedies from Nicole Apelian on their store. If you're watching this on TV, you can look up our channel, Frugal Solutions, on your phone or tablet and find the books by clicking the link in our channel description or any other video description. The perfect drying environment requires 3 key elements: proper airflow, consistent temperature, and controlled humidity. Amish builders create these conditions using strategically placed windows and vents that would make an architect jealous. They've even figured out that meat dries best when hung at specific heights, about 5 to 6 feet off the ground, where the air circulation is optimal. Any higher, and it's too warm. Any lower, and humidity becomes your enemy. Testing for doneness isn't just a matter of poking the meat and hoping for the best. The Amish use something called the bend test. Properly dried meat should crack, but not break when bent, like a green branch. If it snaps like a dry twig, you've gone too far. If it bends like rubber, it needs more time. They also look for a deep, rich color that suggests most moisture has evaporated. Think mahogany, not maple. The tools needed are surprisingly simple: some sturdy hooks, good quality butcher's twine, and a few basic knives. But the most important tool? A good dose of patience. You can't rush this process any more than you can rush a sunrise. The Amish have a knack for timing their drying with seasonal changes, starting as summer winds down and temperatures begin to drop, but before the first frost hits. Here's a nugget of wisdom passed down through generations. Meat drying is best done when the moon is waning. Sounds like an old wives' tale? Perhaps, but there's logic behind it. During this phase, the air tends to be drier and more stable. And speaking of stability, if you're wondering about that 60% weight loss statistic, it's not just water leaving the meat. What remains is concentrated protein and flavor that makes every ounce count double. While anyone can hang meat to dry or throw some salt on a pork chop, the Amish have developed subtle techniques that separate the amateurs from the masters. Take the 3-finger test. It's not a martial arts move, but rather a precise way to check meat readiness that's been passed down through generations. Press 3 fingers gently into the meat. If it springs back like a fresh mattress, it's still too wet. If it barely yields like pressing on a hardwood floor, it's perfect. And if it's hard as a rock, well, you've just created a new doorstop. The height at which meat is positioned during preservation isn't random. It's calculated with the precision of a NASA engineer. The Amish have discovered that every foot of elevation changes the temperature by about 2 degrees and the humidity by 5%. They position different cuts at varying heights. Fatty cuts go higher where it's warmer to help render the fat, while leaner cuts stay lower where it's cooler and more humid. It's like a high-stakes game of meat Tetris. Now, about that apple cider vinegar. It's the secret weapon you never knew you needed. The Amish don't just use it for preservation, they use it to test the air quality in their drying spaces. A small bowl of vinegar left out will change color if the air conditions aren't right. Clear vinegar turning cloudy? Your humidity's too high. Developing a strange film on top? Time to improve the ventilation. It's like a primitive but effective environmental monitoring system. Perhaps the most fascinating technique involves timing based on chicken behavior. Yes, you read that right, chickens. The Amish have noticed that chickens are most active during optimal meat drying conditions, when the birds are constantly scratching and foraging. The air is typically at the perfect temperature and humidity for starting the preservation process. If the chickens are huddled together or seeking shade, conditions aren't ideal. Who needs a weather app when you've got feathered meteorologists? They've even developed a way to test salt concentration in their brining solutions using a raw potato. If it floats like a rubber duck, the brine is ready. If it sinks faster than your hopes of winning the lottery, add more salt. And here's a technique that sounds like magic but works every time. Placing a silver coin on top of meat during the early stages of preservation. If it turns black, something's wrong with your cure. If it stays shiny, you're on the right track. It's like having a medieval food safety inspector at your disposal. These methods might sound simple, even primitive, but they're backed by generations of trial and error. And unlike your smartphone, they never need updating or charging. Modern adaptations of Amish methods. Ever wondered how to bring these time-tested Amish preservation techniques into your 21st century life? You don't need to trade your car for a horse and buggy to make it work. Today's Amish communities have already figured out clever ways to blend traditional wisdom with modern practicality, and they're not keeping it a secret. Converting a spare closet into a mini drying space is easier than assembling flat-pack furniture. First, remove the door and replace it with a screen. Your clothes might have needed ventilation, but your drying meat absolutely demands it. Install a small battery-powered fan at the bottom for air circulation. The Amish might raise an eyebrow at this modern touch, but they'd appreciate the principle. Add a few wooden dowels at different heights, and suddenly you've got yourself a modern meat preservation chamber that would make your ancestors proud. The most urban-friendly techniques focus on small batch preservation. You don't need a barn-sized smokehouse. A cardboard box with proper ventilation can smoke small cuts of meat on your balcony. Just don't let your neighbors think you're hosting an illegal barbecue. For salt curing, a plastic storage container with the right humidity levels can cure enough bacon to make Sunday breakfasts interesting for months. And that fancy wine fridge you barely use, turn it into a temperature-controlled curing chamber. Just don't mix up your prosciutto with your Pinot Noir. Want to test these methods without risking food poisoning or angry neighbors? Start with duck breast prosciutto. It's like preservation with training wheels. The small size and high-fat content make it nearly foolproof, and it only takes about 3 weeks from start to finish. Plus, if something goes wrong, you haven't wasted 15 pounds of premium pork. Here's a practical tip from contemporary Amish preservers. Use a digital hygrometer, a humidity measuring device, to monitor conditions. While traditionalists might rely on feel and experience, having exact measurements can help beginners avoid costly mistakes. It's like using Google Maps instead of navigating by the stars. Sometimes modern tools can help you reach a traditional destination. The beauty of these adapted methods is that they maintain the core principles while fitting into modern lives. You're not just preserving meat, you're preserving a piece of history, just with better temperature control. Common mistakes, seasonal considerations, and safety rules. Let's talk about salt, the most common preservation pitfall since someone first decided to stop their meat from spoiling. Using too much salt isn't just a rookie mistake, it's practically a rite of passage. But here's the fix. If your meat ends up tasting like you dropped it in the Dead Sea, soak it in fresh water for a few hours. Just remember, this isn't like oversalting your soup. You can't just add a potato and hope for the best. Patience isn't just a virtue in meat preservation. It's a necessity. Rushing the process is like trying to speed up a sunrise. It simply doesn't work. The most common timing mishap? Thinking that if 2 weeks of curing is good, 1 week must be good enough. Spoiler alert, it's not. The Amish have a saying. The meat tells you when it's ready, not the calendar. Temperature monitoring mistakes can turn your preservation attempts into a science experiment gone wrong. The biggest blunder is relying on air temperature instead of meat temperature. Just because your shed feels cool doesn't mean the center of your ham is getting the message. And those who store meat near concrete walls during summer, they're learning the hard way that concrete conducts heat better than your teenager conducts electricity to their phone. When it comes to seasonal timing, the Amish follow nature's calendar, not the one hanging in your kitchen. Winter is perfect for dry curing. The cold, dry air is nature's refrigerator. Spring and fall are smoking seasons, when moderate temperatures help maintain the perfect smoke. Summer? That's for planning next year's preservation schedule. As for the moon phases influencing drying times, it's not just old world superstition. The moon affects humidity levels, and humidity is either your best friend or worst enemy in preservation. Safety is where traditional Amish wisdom meets modern food science, and both agree. When in doubt, throw it out. The classic Amish safety check involves all senses. If it looks funny, smells odd, feels slimy, or has colors that would make a rainbow jealous, it's compost material. Trust your nose, but know its limitations. Some harmful bacteria are sneakier than a cat on carpet. Here's a crucial safety tip that combines old and new wisdom. Keep a logbook. Write down everything. When you started, what methods you used, even the weather conditions. It's like a meat diary, but instead of writing about your feelings, you're recording what might keep you from getting food poisoning. The Amish have been doing this for generations, though they probably don't call it data collection. Remember, successful meat preservation is like a good marriage. It takes time, attention, and sometimes you need to admit when you've made a mistake. Unlike marriage, however, you can always start over with a new piece of meat.